Welcome everyone to our virtual happy half hour. We'll be getting started in just a minute. This webinar will be recorded today and distributed to participants afterwards. And we'll be getting started in just a few seconds, waiting for everybody to log into Zoom. And we'll be talking about saving 2020 and growing revenue now. We have producer Rich joining us, so as you're logging on, if you have any technical issues, please feel free to chat him directly. And he will also be posting helpful email addresses or links throughout the program as well. All right, let's get started. Welcome to the virtual happy half hour for July 10th. We are officially in the second half of 2020, and I think this has been a year certainly that will go down in history as the most unusual and perhaps even one of the most difficult. So I think for many of us, particularly us here at the Brooks Group, I think, and for many of you out there, the start of the second half or even a new quarter feels like something of a reset. So today we're going to be sharing ideas to maximize your revenue through the end of this year. These are things that you can be doing now to reset or refocus your sales efforts to win 2020. I'm Michelle Richardson. I am the Vice President of Sales Performance Research here at the Brooks Group, and I am joined by a socially distant Russ Scherer. We are coming to you from opposite coasts. Russ is our Director of Facilitation and Coaching Excellence, so welcome, Russ.
Thanks, Michelle. And I'm really excited to get into this topic with everyone today because as I have talked to our clients over the last month to 2 months, this is the question that comes up more than anything else, which is how do I make my number or make the number that's as close to the number I was given in January as possible? And so this has been a fun topic to talk to people and gather ideas. And we're looking forward to sharing sort of the best practices that we're seeing with everyone. And we're sponsored again by the Sales Leadership Forum. Michelle, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So we launched the 1.0 version of the Brooks Sales Leadership Forum back in March. It really was a way for sales leaders to connect and support and really kind of navigate the critical business issues of COVID. And as we are transitioning into new quarters, hopefully into reopening, we are transitioning the Sales Leadership Forum as well. So we are moving to a twice quarterly format. Each session will be 2 hours long, and we'll have separate dedicated sessions for sales leaders and talent development professionals. We'll have actually an upcoming forum showcase for talent development professionals. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. But these are opportunities to really connect and talk about not only the COVID-related issues and survival, tactical kinds of things, but really even the more strategic. So for instance, how do I expand territory? So if I've got a territory covered by one sales rep, what do I do when I bring in a second sales rep? How do I keep that first rep motivated knowing that he has to give up half of his accounts? How do we work with underperforming salespeople and know whether to coach them or maybe go ahead and set them free? So these are the types of issues that we talk about. And if you're interested in learning more about the forum, please email us at forum@thebrooksgroup.com.
Excellent. Thanks, Michelle.
Yep.
So today we're going to talk about kind of 9 must-dos to save 2020 as much as you can. And I've broken it down into 4 ideas that we're seeing for salespeople, 4 ideas for sales leadership, and then kind of 1 mandatory for everyone. And we'll get through all 9 of those. So, but before we start, we're going to do one thing a little differently this week. We've got 4 different polls that we'd like your input, feedback on. So I think, Michelle, it's time for poll number one, right?
It is. Rich, could you launch that first poll? We're doing some real-time research, as Russ said. Normally we send out these surveys in advance, but we want to get your perspective right now. So as you start the second half of 2020, where are you relative to your original 2020 sales plan? And I'm really curious, Russ, to see these results because we've been tracking this data between March and June. And as we ended June, there was quite a bit of optimism and the number of organizations that were behind plan was significantly decreased. That peaked in April and was starting to decrease, and we were starting to see organizations do better. So I'm curious to see where we are now. And
Yeah, and even at this time, real-time data is so important. Just as we found at the beginning of COVID, how over the first couple of weeks of the quarantine, people started to see their business change. Even in the month of June and the first part of July, we saw optimism, and then the airlines have been talking about how bookings are down. So looks like everyone pretty much has voted. So let me share the results. There you go. They're out in front for everyone. So you can see that it's pretty close, about half significantly behind plan, about 40% slightly behind plan. If my math is right, that's about maybe 3%. So that's an awful lot of people who are digging and looking for ideas on how to make 2020's number. So why don't we move on, Michelle, and start talking about that. So the first thing that we're seeing is that really you need to target your best market segments. And I know we've touched on this before, but not all market segments are performing exactly the same. I was reminded of a company that I used to work for that had a product that was built around older technology. It had been their mainline product for a number of years, and they were looking at it every year sliding somewhere between 10 and 15%. So the attitude towards the company was, it's kind of negative. But as we dug into it, someone determined that there was one segment in the business that was growing at actually about 20% per year. So even though the overall line was down and some segments were down, this was a group that was growing very quickly. And, they use that analytics to drive product development, to think about how we marketed, to think about even what our sales talked about. So you hear a lot these days about using analytics to make decisions. Here's a very simple analytic. Figure out either what product segments or market segments are doing the best and focus in on those.
yeah, absolutely, Russ. I was just going to say, definitely encourage leaders to think creatively here. I know one sales leader that I was speaking with in healthcare, and he might think, well, how do I segment that out? They called on nursing homes, hospitals, and physicians. And what they found was they couldn't get into hospitals and nursing homes, but the ones that were calling on physicians really rebounded and did very well during COVID. So again, thinking creatively, it doesn't have to be across different industries. It could be, again, just even different demographics within your accounts, looking at account size, that sort of thing.
And sometimes one of the things you can do is take a couple of the folks who are your best hunters, since a lot right now is going on in account management, and ask them to go off and see if they can penetrate either a key account you haven't been able to get into before, or maybe a new market segment if there's something adjacent that's easy to get to. From my experience, bringing a senior person, sometimes it's a lot easier for a VP or a CXO to get that meeting with a key person at an account, rather than just somebody who's an account manager or a field salesperson trying to get up higher in organizations. So think strategically about how you get in there. And I just wanted to encourage you, the PricewaterhouseCoopers continues to do their survey of global CFOs. And the last pass for that from June was that 63% of those CFOs are asking themselves and their product teams, how do they come up with innovative new products or services? So if you're selling something that can help them there, you can tie into the greater C-level focus. And 30% of those CFOs said they're looking to add alternative sources because they're concerned about supply chain. So both of those are opportunities. But again, make sure you're focusing in on those best pieces. The second thing that we're seeing people talk about is that you've really got to go deep inside existing accounts. It is hard to build new relationships virtually. It can be done, but it takes a bit more time. And so what we're seeing is data that more and more companies are looking inside existing accounts. SBI did some research that said that existing revenue has grown to be about 3/4 of the average company's revenue, which is up about 5-6% from where it was back in 2019. And so you want to send your reps deeper into the accounts. And one of the things here that if you've had impact, you know about, it's how you're positioned. I had a guy, it's great that they put a picture of a mine on this, because we had a client who was into mining. In one of the classes, I asked how people were known, and this guy said, well, he was known as the donut man because he always showed up and brought donuts. And I just asked him the question. I said, well, do your customers buy products that you sell, not from you, but from one of your competitors? And he said, well, absolutely. And I said, well, wouldn't it be better if you were known as that person as opposed to the donut person? And he thought about it, and he said, gee, I'd never really thought about that before. But we want to make sure that our reps are talking about the entire range of products, or at least a broader range than where they're currently selling in those accounts, either new divisions or new connections inside of the accounts.
And we have a poll here, actually, to see what you all are doing to gain additional revenue and traction with existing customers. So Rich, if you could launch that second poll. So some strategies here. Would love to see your thoughts on this. Russ, you've got strategy here on establishing a business review program. I've got a client that I spoke with recently who's had quite a bit of success with the business review idea. So yeah. They were in financial services. They've spent quite a bit of time during COVID just having tactical firefighting type conversations. So at the start of third quarter, they were going to go back to their key accounts and have account review conversations. So these need to be really customer focused, asking questions like, what are you seeing from your customers? What is your strategic plan through the end of the year? And then from the rep's perspective, having them, to your point, share insights. What are they seeing from their other customers? And they may find that through these conversations, opportunities will bubble up. And so again, getting that focus off of COVID and really saying, okay, strategically, what are you doing through the end of the year? And really being that customer focus.
I agree. A lot of times people will say, well, we have a great relationship with that account, but it's really only with one or two people. So a business relationship program allows you usually to go deeper and sometimes bring in other layers of management, both from your company and from the client's company, so that you can build a real connection. I always like to say a deep relationship with one or two people is really a shoestring, given how much people transition and move out of companies. And then the other thing I would say is that I also often hear from salespeople like, well, I don't want to go in and do a business review because we're not doing very well. We're not servicing them well, or we're behind, or we have a quality issue. And I always say, you know what, it's always better as the company to go in and own your issues, because your competitors are definitely going to be talking about those. So don't try to hide behind like things aren't going well, because the reality is somebody's going to be talking to them. Exactly. So Michelle, it looks like our key things are calling on new business groups and marketing campaigns to reach old customers.
Yes, and followed by, reviewing old customer lists, meeting new contacts beyond your existing relationships, and then establishing the business review program.
All right. Number 3 in our topics conversation is the idea that you really need to reshape and focus on what's called the high value message. We all know that we have in our markets competitors who deliver genetic products, and we call those commodities. And yet sometimes when you deliver a generic sales presentation, that's also a commodity. And nobody tends to get excited about commodities. And so how do you reshape it so that you're focused in on the things that they want? And really what it means is, how can you help them strategize over some key issue they're currently facing? Or to quote Aaron Burr in the current Hamilton phase, you want a seat in the room where it happens. I had a client one time who was in the landscape architecture business, and he wasn't sure how this whole positioning thing worked, but he had some conversations with his clients, and very quickly he was invited to a property manager's retreat to talk about how they could improve tenant satisfaction and reduce turnover. That was their key strategic issue. He talked about how the right landscaper with the ability to respond quickly to unique problems or things that came up could help them with that, and immediately position himself above every other potential for providing information or solutions for that. And we, even at the Brook Group, are having more and more conversations between our subject matter experts and our clients, talking about this idea of, the revenue shortfalls they've got, and how do you really have the conversation in a way that together you're exploring alternatives and figure out what works best for that client, their market, and their situation.
Absolutely. This is not necessarily about pushing a product in particular. It's really about strategizing. I had a client that once said, knowledge is a differentiator. And as salespeople, we are exposed to all kinds of clients, various organizations. We have a wealth of information and knowledge that our individual clients don't have. And I've read recently that one thing buyers are looking for right now is information, access to what other people are doing, how are they being successful, what strategies are they trying. And your salespeople can bring that information in these types of collaborative conversations. And it works. It catches attention. It differentiates the message when you're sending that email across. It differentiates across other salespeople who are just selling or trying to push a product. So it does work in terms of getting a response.
Yep, absolutely. And then the fourth thing that sales can do right now is really understand before you price. Look, it's a challenging time, and companies in challenging markets face price pressure. And in those times, there's also a sense that reps discount sooner. And so we've talked about in the past ideas of pricing committees, which are cross-functional teams, not to slow down special bids, but where you've got everybody together to make a decision, to make sure you've looked at all the aspects of deals. We're seeing creative work done around adjusting the terms and conditions on deals, reconfiguring products.
You get on?
Or delivery. We're seeing adjusting warranty time periods. And of course, these have different effects on your balance sheet, but they may make sense. We're also hearing of companies that are bringing in stronger resources for negotiating. It's always surprised me that customers bring in specialized buyers who know how to negotiate a deal, and we expect our salespeople to have all those skills. So for big deals, maybe it's somebody they can talk strategy over, maybe it's somebody who comes in and does it. Other things such as adjusting your minimum order quantity without giving up margin floors, or maybe even when freight charges are waived. All of those things that are on the table are a mindset of what choices exist other than take it or leave it. And you want to make sure it's all apples to apples before you get into that negotiation.
So as we've mentioned earlier, the Brooks Sales Leadership Forum is the sponsor for today's webinar. We're really excited to bring a forum showcase to you all next week on Wednesday, July 15th. It is specifically for talent development folks. So if you are in HR, if you are in learning development, if you have responsibility for making sure your sales team has the skills needed to sell in this virtual environment, we encourage you to join us at the talent development version of our Sales Leadership Forum Showcase. So this is an opportunity to sample the new format, and we'll be sharing ideas around hiring and recruiting and developing top performing salespeople. How can you work better with your sales partners? And how do you make sure that your sales teams have the virtual skills that they need to be successful? So it's an opportunity to share talent development and HR issues in a peer environment. So that will be July 15th. And if you are interested in participating, please email forum@thebrooks.group. as I mentioned earlier, we also have dedicated forums for sales leaders, and we will be kicking those off here shortly. These are opportunities to, again, share strategic sales opportunities and challenges and problems in a peer group. It also gives you access to our Brooks sales effectiveness experts like Russ here. They moderate these groups. And so if you've been through any of our training before, if you've been through a sales management program or even an impact program, and you really connected well with your trainer, just know that they are also involved in these forums, and there's an opportunity for you to connect with them, not only with your peers, but to get that expert advice from the Brooks Group as well. Again, that email address, if you're interested, is forum@thebrooksgroup.com.
And let me just remind you that if you have a question, please give it to us either through the Q&A or through the chat. We will take our time to answer all of the questions that get asked, even if we run across our half-hour time frame. We've gone through our sales things. Now, what can sales leadership do? Here's number one. It's time to think about compensation. Salespeople go into this field. One of the reasons, a primary reason, is because they are high utilitarian. If you've taken impact, they are motivated not just by earning, but by earning potential. When that's fuzzy, it can be hitting at the motivation for your folks. Now, what we're still seeing data from the field is that quotas are not, in a broad way, being readjusted. Last data I've seen, still less than 50% of the people have reset quotas. But here's some of the things that they are doing. We're seeing some comp plans adjusted to be shorter term around key activities, such as quality additions to the pipeline, and you've got to define what quality means, but building that up, trying to get into existing accounts and get a larger share of wallet, or getting those first orders from new accounts. Those are being paid at a slightly higher level than historically. We're also seeing, and this I think is pretty innovative, the idea of stretching comp plans over the next 18 months. This works especially if you tend to work on a percent achievement basis, where the first two are kind of unsure, but they expect that by Q2 next year, things are going to be normal enough that they can get a read on it. And so you can make slight adjustments along the way, but it helps the person realize that they're going to make their money over a bit of a longer term process. And then I also am seeing removing individual performance goals and moving to compensation based on overall company achievement. Personally, I'm not a big fan of that in the long term, because I think people should be paid for the work they do in sales. But I do think it might make some sense now if you also combined it with a set of bonusable KPIs that they could measure against. So with that, I think, Michelle, we've got another poll to see if our audience is like what we've been reading in other research.
Absolutely. Rich, could you please launch the next poll? We'd like to know if you've reset your sales compensation targets. So yes, no, or we'll adjust them when the forecast is clearer. This just seems to be the burning question, Russ, the one we hear every single week. What to do about targets, what to do about compensation, what to do about KPIs.
And it's a tough one, because every time you get a number, a lot of times you start the year wondering how you're going to get to it. But this is just even tougher than that, over and over again.
Yeah, I think with the news being up and down, so we're shut down, we're reopened, we may shut down again. It certainly brings about a lot of uncertainty in organizations. I think it makes them hesitant to take action. And so right now we're trending on the nose or pretty high.
Our audience appears to be the same as what we've seen in other data. If you want to head and end that poll and share it, just about 2/3, a little over 60% have not adjusted compensation. About 1/3 have. And a couple of folks are committed to doing it when the forecast is clearer. So thank you for sharing that with us. The next thing that leadership can be involved in helping with is revisiting the required skills that you've been in. I've got two controversial things for leadership here. So we'll see if you agree with me. I'd love to know just from the chats. If 100 years ago, a sales rep said to you, you know what, I don't really like cars, so I think I'll just stick to riding my horse. Do you think sales management would have said, sure, that makes sense. Just go ahead, stick to your horse? the reality or the parallel in my mind is a lot of people say, well, you know what? My people don't really like to use computers, or my people don't really like to use anything virtual. And I don't know that we have that option anymore. Some industries are further ahead than others, but those are the tools of the trade. I personally know two people in their deep 80s who've learned to use Zoom during this just so they could talk to their families. And if those folks can figure it out, trust me, salespeople can figure it out too. McKinsey, in a recent study from the 1st of July, said that 2/3 of business-to-business decision makers, that is your buyers, say that remote selling is effective for them. But 77% of sales reps have a need for new skills or training in order to thrive. So if success takes a toolbox, then you're going to have to open it up and take a look at it. And I want to challenge you in two different areas that don't get thought about very often. Number one is look at non-English speakers. I was working with a company in Texas. 50% of their customers, English was a second language, but their sales rep in Texas didn't speak Spanish. And I just think you're missing that ability to have a better connection and a better conversation with your customers. And then second of all, there was a recent Harvard Business Review study about women, and it claimed that women were the future of business-to-business sales, especially in wholesale and manufacturing and financial services. And they measured 7 core skills. They said women are better at connecting, sharing solutions, and collaborating. Men are better at improving and driving outcomes, and they have the same impact on analysis and influence. This is follow-up to some studies that IBM did in the 1980s, where they found that their women reps consistently outperformed their male reps. And so industries that we work with, there's usually a very high percentage of men. As you start to think about the skills you need, it might be the chance to start to recruit some women into your sales organization. But coming up with the skills you need to be successful now is important. And at the Brook Group, we'd love to talk to you about that as we go forward. Number 3 for leadership, refining your processes and tools. Here's what gets to me. Every organization we walk into, we have a conversation with management and sales, and they always point to things that don't work. I worked for a company one time that had the worst circulation policy for expense reports I had ever seen. Everybody in the division knew it was bad. How do you get people paid sooner? And we just couldn't fix it. We see the same thing when we train people. People deploy CRM systems, but everybody still has to fill out the same kind of monthly reports. So I encourage you, sit with your folks, brainstorm ideas that you can get around optimizing or getting rid of processes, and really see what you can do to help. Again, this McKinsey study in July said the 3 things buyers value is speed, transparency, and expertise. Michelle already touched on that expertise one early on, getting those subject matter experts in the room, but speed and transparency. And yes, it doesn't take a lot of money. When I brainstormed this in past companies, we've come up with short-term, long-term, and ideas that take a lot of capital. And you're amazed how just attacking some of those short-term help morale, help people see you're moving forward and that you're going. And one that we're big on is implementing a sales process. If you're playing football, there are yardage markers on the field so you know where you are. You can't kick a field goal from everywhere. You've got to be able to measure where it is. And so think about what do we do that allows us to look at where are we in the game of an opportunity and how can we determine how to be successful with it. And then the third biggest area I see for gain is alignment between inside sales and outside reps. That tends to be an issue where there's less efficiency. There is not clarity around roles. I've seen people have hidden orders inside because they don't trust outside and vice versa. So if you're a sales leader, if a little bit of work in that area will really help you keep your reps selling in this 2020 time window.
And Rich, we have another poll. Want to see what you all are doing. What kinds of tools and processes are you adding, reevaluating, or changing? Account management, reporting, CRM, sales process, and forecasting. And actually a lot of these topics, I think, Russ, this particular strategy that you've put here really overlaps with some of the other things we've talked about in terms of getting more business from existing accounts and being able to segment, really focus on certain market segments. That's really going to depend on your account management process, the CRM data and reporting that you have, and even your sales process. So there's a lot of, I think, interconnection here. And it's definitely worth, as you look at these strategies, it's definitely worth taking a look at the processes and tools that you're using to execute.
Michelle, I like that you asked about sales forecasting, because in an unknown environment, sometimes availability of product is really important. Mm-hmm. And so improving anything you can in sales forecasting, which is very difficult when you have unknown data. But my experience, again, is pushing it as close to the field as you can, who are talking to customers, really can help. And this is a great set of data. It shows that people are trying different things to see what works and helps them be successful.
Yes, so. And about half of you are saying account management process. So definitely speaks to that, the importance of those existing accounts.
And then the last thing that leaders can do really to think, and this is really controversial if the one about skills was tough, is there a way you can monetize some unique value or service they offer? We're seeing a lot of investment going into customer success activities around increasing loyalty and retention. And there's just a question, are some of those chargeable? We worked with a client who did very complex designs for their customers, and then hoping that once the design was complete, they would be awarded the contract to build it. And what they found was more and more companies would take their design and put it out to bid. And so if you can't charge for that design system up front, maybe you talk about how if you don't win the overall project, there's going to be a cost for that. So it helps you on the back end from a price competitive basis. I worked for a company one time that released a new set of technologies, and we used to just ship out a piece of hardware and some software, and we got buried with support calls. And what we found were customers were doing more research than real development. So it was a long time before revenue. So we turned it around. We built what we called the Forerunner program. It included mandatory training at our facility for 3 days. They got the equipment, but there was a fee, a pretty significant fee for that. What we found was customers were happier because they learned the technology faster. They deployed faster, which got us revenue quicker, and our support calls went down a lot. And our salespeople even used it as a differentiator. I was on a call one time, and one of the prospects said, well, you know what, your competitors are willing to just give us all that for free. And the guy goes, yep. He goes, and you won't know how to use it, and that'll take you more time. And what's really important here, getting the product into the market or figuring out how to frustrate your engineer. And we won the business because of that kind of bold piece. Labor is a huge cost. Labor is reduced because organizations are smaller. If you're in a situation where people are trying to learn something with your products, there may be an opportunity there. And if you can't monetize it, at least translate your advantages into dollars. I read some research this week that talked about refrigerator sales, which I know most of you don't sell refrigerators, but they used to say this saves you so many kilowatt hours per year. And what they found was by just converting that into dollars, which means this many dollar savings, their sales went up double digits because you took something that was technically correct, but you translated it into the language of the customer. And then finally, the last idea we've got is keep on communicating. When the crisis first hit, there was a lot of communication, daily check-in calls, end of the day calls, connecting to see how people were doing, empathy. So this is both to teams if you're in sales leadership or to your customers if you are in sales. What's happened is we're now back in our offices. A lot of that's kind of gone away. And I would encourage you, keep up that regular cadence. As managers, we know we don't know all the answers. But silence right now, in a lot of cases, is being translated into leadership's confused. They don't know what to do. So don't lose the trust you built. Keep talking. In fact, I read this one article talked about how a manager has established a monthly Ask Me Anything session. They have a culture, and that's a culture of open communication. But boy, when your people feel like they're safe to ask any question, they're not going to spend any time doubting about the future. They're going to keep their heads down and working hard. And just the last piece of data, McKinsey reports that if you go back to 2007 and measure from 2007 to 2017, sort of the Great Recession, The companies that stayed focused, were going after their targets and kept working on them, ended up returning 8% more total return to their shareholders than those that lost focus, that got consumed by other activities. So keep the eye on the ball, if you will, from a communications perspective. So what's a quick summary? Focus on your best markets, dig deep into existing customers, make sure you've got that high value message that you're delivering. Don't be a commodity as a salesperson. Understand before pricing. Think about compensation, success skills, tools and processes, monetize or at least communicate the value where you can, and keep on communicating. So now it's up to you. Questions, thoughts? Are there things that are on your mind or ideas you've got about making 2020 that you'd like us to talk about?
Yeah, anything you've implemented that has worked. Feel free to share that as well. And I will mention, while we're waiting for questions to come in the spirit of growing revenue now, the next workshop in our Selling at Social Distance series is virtual commitments and closing when you cannot get face-to-face. How's that for a segue? That is July 23rd at 3 o'clock Eastern Time. So it's a 90-minute workshop to really learn how to set the stage for closing business in a virtual environment. So if you're interested in learning more about that workshop, please email webinar@thebrooksgroup.com. And it looks like no questions.
All right. So again, any question you've got, go ahead and you can email either webinar@thebrooksgroup.com or forum. If there's anything we've said, if you'd like us to follow up on anything, we'd be glad to do that. Our next webinar is going to be in 2 weeks. Again, we've taken direction from you. And so the title of our next webinar is How Buyers Want Sales to Service Accounts Today. So this isn't going to be about customer service per se. We hear salespeople over and over again talk about how well they service their accounts. And we've been looking at, as we reported earlier, McKinsey's information about buyers want speed, transparency, and expertise. But unfortunately, too many salespeople believe that service means taking people to lunch, visiting them face-to-face, and giving them pins with logos on it. And so we're really going to kind of dig and explore what it is that the buyers are looking for and how you can use or tune your sales organization to make sure that they're doing everything they can to service their buyers and freeing up a bit of spare time to go after new accounts or new people in their existing accounts.
Excellent. So we will see everyone on Friday, July 24th. Thank you so much for joining us today, and make it a great 2 weeks.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.